1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. This is Your Turn, a live call-in show featuring spirited discussion and debate about issues that matter to the community. Stay with us to hear what Northwest Florida thinks. Better yet, call in at 623-1330 and tell us what you think. It's Your Turn here on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. Now, here's the host of Your Turn.
Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with three little words: we, the people. We, the people, tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. We, the people, are free.
We, the people, are free. Welcome to Freedom Friday, and we are free. And we're so glad that you're listening to us this afternoon. WEBY 1330, 25,000 watts of sheer broadcasting power. We are broadcasting live along the Gulf Coast and reaching portions of 4 states along the Gulf Coast. And that's just through the little black box called a radio. We are also streaming live over the internet, and we have listeners nationally and internationally. As a matter of fact, we'll have some international callers today, as well as several national callers, and so you'll want to stay tuned to this show. A lot of things going on, folks, in the world. A lot of things, and we'll be discussing them, especially the most important and the most prominent things, right here on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Mallory Bardwell is your world-famous producer of this program, and Mallory and I both say hello to you. We're honored. I'm honored that you are listening to us today. If you want to be a part of the show, you can call in 623-1330. 623-1330 is the number. The area code is 850-623-1330. This is the Oval Office of Gulf Talk Radio, Gulf Coast Talk Radio, right here along the Gulf Coast, and we're glad that you're with us. Folks, listen, you probably know by now, because it happened early this morning, at least the announcements. Mubarak has left Egypt. The president of Egypt, our 30-year ally, a 30-year ally to Israel, albeit described as a dictator, and probably not the very best thing that Egypt could have. I know that I wouldn't probably want to live in Egypt under a dictatorship, but you know, he's gone, and the Muslim Brotherhood is in. Right now, the Egyptian military is in control, but, of course, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad of Iran, he has weighed in on what has happened, and he has declared, just on Fox News a few moments ago, he has declared, finally, the main goal of the Muslim Brotherhood. Revolution has been achieved. Quote, here's a quote from the president of Iran. Despite all of the West's complicated and satanic designs, a new Middle East is now emerging with the Zionist regime and U.S. interference. A place where that's without the Zionist regime and U.S. interference, a place where the arrogant powers will no longer have any place, Ahmadinejad told the crowd. So, you know, the president of Iran is very happy about this, and Israel is very sad. But, you know, the man sitting in the Oval Office of the United States, he's happy. He's happy right along with the president of Iran. Yes, he is. And so, of course, is our national security director. We'll talk more about that in the next few moments. Folks, you are in for a treat of a show today. We will have 4 very prominent, very interesting guests today. Number 1, our Canadian correspondent, Mike Shoesmith, will be calling us from the eastern shores of Canada today. He calls in every Friday. He is an official part of this show. Introducing to you today, our plan is a brand new Midwestern United States correspondent. His name is Bob Chichester. He will be joining us on the show in just a few moments to give us some political perspective. You will enjoy his political commentary and opining. I've known Bob for years, and he is a tremendous political commentator. He will be joining the show here in the next few moments, and he'll be giving us a perspective from out in the Midwest, out in the Missouri-Kansas area. And then at the top of the second hour, it begins with some nationally and internationally known and recognized guests. The first guest will be IQ Al-Rassooli. IQ Al-Rassooli. He will be talking about what's going on with the Egyptian takeover by the Muslim Brotherhood and the stepping down of Mubarak. IQ Al-Rassooli, many of you have heard him before. He appears on many, many talk radio programs. He is a former Muslim, has immersed himself for over a quarter of a century into the studies of the Muslim teaching, the Muslim understanding of the Muslim worldview is what I'm trying to say. The Muslim political worldview, the Muslim political agenda. And he is quite an expert on this. His native tongue is Arabic. He was born and raised in a Muslim family. He has since come out of it, but he knows the Quran backwards and forwards. He understands the Muslim agenda. He understands the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood agenda. He will be on with us at the top of the second hour. At the bottom of the second hour, Joseph Klein will be with us, an internationally recognized political consultant and author, best-selling author. He is an attorney and a journalist, and he's a much sought-after interview guest, appearing on numerous radio and television programs, including Fox News and CNN and many others. But Joseph Klein has been on Freedom Friday with us before, but he will reappear this afternoon at the bottom of the second hour. He, too, is quite an international political expert, and he, too, will weigh in on what's happening in Egypt. Folks, you're going to hear the truth on Freedom Friday about this stuff. Not the political spin coming from the left, certainly not what's coming out of the White House. Goodness. I'm talking about our Department of, the Director of National Intelligence. The United States Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, told a congressional hearing, quote, "The term Muslim Brotherhood is an umbrella term for a variety of movements. In the case of Egypt, a very heterogeneous group, largely secular, which has eschewed violence and has decried Al-Qaeda as a perversion of Islam." Of course, several experts followed right after him, government experts basically saying he's an idiot. Don't listen to what our National Director of National Intelligence just said. Where does Obama find these guys? These are the advisors to the White House. This is the Director of National Intelligence who's telling a congressional hearing that the Muslim Brotherhood is just this secular group that is opposed to violence. How did they just take over Egypt? Was that nonviolent? What is the stated goal of the Muslim Brotherhood? Folks, we broke this right here on Freedom Friday several weeks ago when all of this was just beginning to come down in Egypt. And I gave you the rundown on the Muslim Brotherhood. They've been around since 1928. They assisted Hitler in rounding up Jews. Their stated goal is the destruction of Israel. Their stated goal is the destruction and the weakening of the United States of America. This is who Obama has aligned himself with. This is who Obama supports. And yes, I'll say much of the left and Wall Street, obviously, supports this as well. The stock market goes up today, and the news is saying it's because of what has happened in Egypt. People are celebrating. Hey, folks, hear me. If I could wave a magic wand and give Egypt a democracy, if I could wave the magic wand and give Egypt, no, not a democracy, excuse me. I bought into the brainwashing. If I could give Egypt a constitutional republic, if I could give Egypt freedom, if I could give Egypt that and not a dictator, of course I would do that. But in this case, the United States and Israel and the international community was not given that kind of a choice. We were given the choice of backing and supporting a 30-year ally of Israel and the United States, as much as an ally as one could be in Egypt, or backing the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, that's who Ahmadinejad backs, if that gives you any kind of a hint as to who the Muslim Brotherhood really is or who they are. Okay? So that's the choice we had. So, you know, given my choice, as I'm opining on talk radio, of course, I don't have the magic wand. I'm not the ruler of the world. If If I did, I think I would have pushed the red button a long time ago on a few people. But bottom line is, we didn't have that choice. In my opining, I didn't have that choice. Here's the choice we have. Do we want who Israel wants to be in charge of the 11th largest standing army in the world, or do we want who Iran wants? You know, that's the whole point. And so I want who Israel wants in this case. Given the two choices between Mubarak and the Muslim Brotherhood, then I'll take Mubarak. Now, is he the best choice in the world? No, of course not. And I know people would argue, well, it looks like the populace of Egypt wants. Well, I don't know. The vocal populace does. I don't know. You remember back during the Vietnam War, and we had all the protesters and tens of thousands of people in the streets, and the fire bombings and the riots and the protest, and the news focused on them, and somebody could have said overseas, that's what America wants. But that's not true. The vast majority of America didn't agree with those protesters. But the protesters are the ones that got all the news coverage. So I don't know that the vast majority of Egypt wants the Muslim Brotherhood in control. I know the ones that were in the streets pretty much do. I know the media seems to think that they want the Muslim Brotherhood in control. I understand that. So that's where we are. Folks, that is where we are. But here's the deal. Mubarak has left Egypt. He has turned it over to the Egyptian military now. And now the Muslim Brotherhood apparently is in control. We'll find out this afternoon when we speak with IQ Al-Rassooli and as we speak with Joseph Klein. Both of those guys are coming up, national and international political consultants and correspondents. They will be coming up in the second hour. The first hour, we'll bring Bob Chichester to you, our Midwestern correspondent from St. Louis and Missouri, Kansas area, and also Mike Shoesmith from Canada. Both of those guys will be coming up very soon. But that's the big story today, and there's so much more. There's still a lot of breaking news on this Obama citizenship stuff. But let's do this. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll come right to Bob Chichester, our Midwestern correspondent, on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. We'll be right back.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
All right, you are back. You are back. We are back. I am back. Freedom Friday. Carl Gallups, Mallory Bardwell, our producer. We're so glad that you're with us this afternoon on this beautiful Friday afternoon along the Gulf Coast. And as I promised you, our Midwestern correspondent, Bob Chichester, calling from the Kansas City area. Bob, are you with us?
I am, Carl.
Okay, fantastic. Bob, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Bob is our Midwestern correspondent to the Freedom Friday show. He is a seasoned political commentator. And like myself and our Canadian correspondent, Mike Shoesmith, Bob is unashamedly a God and country kind of guy. He doesn't worry about political correctness. He just gets to the nuts and bolts. He has his opinions on things. I've tracked him over the years, and 99.6% of the time his opinions are perfectly correct. He'll be a perfect fit here at Freedom Friday. Bob, thank you for coming to us today out of Kansas City. What's the weather like out there today?
Well, the weather, we're having a heat wave, Carl. It's actually all the way up to 36 degrees.
Okay, good. So you're a little
covered with snow, and over the last 2 weeks, we're glad for a little warmth because over the last 2 weeks, it's been so cold that I think the gang members are actually all wearing their pants pulled all the way up.
No, they're not.
Yeah,
no.
Right so.
Bob, that's hilarious. Well, you know, we'll just we'll pray for some more cold weather for you guys.
We don't need any more of that.
I know. Well, Bob, listen, you want to talk with us today about Kris Kobach and Claire McCaskill. Tell us what's going on.
That's right. This being my inaugural phone call to your show, and I appreciate the opportunity, I thought I'd kind of concentrate on some Midwest regionalities that also have some national implications.
Yes.
And the first guy I wanted to talk about was Kris Kobach. Now, he is the newly elected Secretary of State in the state of Kansas. He is a rising star in the Republican Party. He's very bright, very eloquent. More notably, your listeners will know him as the person who authored the Arizona immigration law.
Wow.
He was a law professor at the University of Missouri's Kansas City campus, and he partnered with one of the Republican legislators in Arizona to write that law.
And how did they do that, Bob? Did they know him? I mean, how was that connection made, I wonder?
I really don't know how the two of them got together.
Okay.
Whether he initiated or this legislator initiated. But,
okay. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, at any rate, many of our listeners probably saw him on TV last year when the immigration debate was raging. I know that's kind of been below the radar now with all the other things that are going on, but he made a lot of TV and radio appearances explaining and defending the law. And my wife and I had the chance to hear him speak at one of the Tea Party-style events held in Kansas City about a year ago. That lineup included Fred Thompson and J.C. Watts, Lynn Cheney, Sarah Palin. It was a great event. Lasted 7 hours, but it was so engaging you weren't even aware of the passage of time. You know?
Wow.
Well, Kris Kobach spoke, of course, on the Arizona law that day, and we thought his explanation of the law made a lot of sense. Now, first he said, don't worry about this law being overturned in the courts. It was written with the knowledge that it would be legally challenged, and he said this law is constitutional. It will eventually be ruled as such when it gets to the Supreme Court, which gave us a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
Now, next he explained that the law basically says if a law enforcement officer has detained someone for suspicion of committing a crime, and while the suspect is being detained, the officer suspects that he or she may be in the country illegally, that officer may ask for documentation which demonstrates his or her citizenship.
Right.
Now, Kobach had a great line during that speech. You may remember that our president had made a remark about the law last year, saying that because of the Arizona immigration law, a family couldn't even go out for ice cream on a Sunday afternoon without fear of being accosted or harassed.
I remember him saying that. And, of course, with his birth status, I don't think he could even go there now.
Agreed. Well, Kobach referred to that statement, and he said, you're wrong, Mr. President. The only way that this law would affect a family going out for ice cream is if one of them pulled a gun and tried to rob the ice cream store. Now, then the law might mean they were accosted and harassed, but of course they should be.
Right.
Now, Kris Kobach had another thing to say about the law. He talked about the strategy behind it, and I thought this was fascinating. Here's an example he used. He said, let's say there's a 100-mile stretch of highway where a lot of people break the speed limit. That makes this stretch of highway unsafe, and there have been people hurt and killed because of all the speeding. So what do you do about that? Do you pull every trooper in the state away from their patrol areas so they can all patrol this one stretch of highway? Or do you make it your stated goal to ticket every speeder on that stretch of highway? Probably not, because that's not the best use of your limited resources. Instead, you put one trooper there, and that one trooper will hand out a few tickets, but everyone else who drives that stretch will slow down because they know when they see that trooper and see him handing out tickets to others, that they now have a real chance of getting ticketed if they speed.
Right.
You don't have to catch them all. You just have to catch enough and be visible enough to make the speeders fear driving too fast.
Right.
This is the strategy behind the Arizona law. You catch some, jail them, and deport them, and you make sure everyone else knows that they might get caught.
Right. And you publicize that.
And you publicize it.
Right.
Now, of course, he admitted, and we all know this, this is only one piece of the puzzle for immigration enforcement. We've also got to build a fence. It's a fence with no gaps, no virtual coverage, just one continuous, thick, tall, razor, bad boy behemoth.
Yes, right.
That's going to intimidate intruders. It won't stop everybody, but it will be a deterrent. Yeah. It will also take some technical resources for surveillance and more border guards, possibly even using the military, and more changes to immigration law to give those guards more tools. Right. But I was very impressed with Kris Kobach. And as I said, I think he's a rising political star, and it shouldn't surprise us if we see him on the national scene in future years.
Oh, I hope so.
Possibly as a congressman or a senator, and after that, who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. That's tremendous. Well, we're quickly running out of time. Tell us your opinions on Claire McCaskill, and a Democrat senator from Missouri who's kind of shifting her sands right now.
Yeah, Claire McCaskill is a freshman Democrat senator. She was elected in 2006, so she'll be up for election in 2012. She's very vulnerable. She voted for the stimulus. She voted for Obamacare, and she was very vocal about passing those two things. And she recently voted, as all the Democrats did in the Senate, against the repeal of Obamacare. Now, she's in trouble, so she recently joined with a couple of Republicans to sponsor a couple of bills that would have some spending cuts in them. And because of that, she has become a little unpopular with her liberal base and her other fellow Democrats in Washington. An interesting story came out recently that suggested that the Democratic National Committee actually awarded the 2012 convention to Charlotte, North Carolina, instead of St. Louis, who was bidding for it, because they wanted to send a message to Claire McCaskill about party unity.
Wow.
And there's even a bizarre report, and who knows if it's true, that McCaskill may have even sabotaged the effort to bring it to St. Louis because she didn't want Obama's unpopularity to be played out on national TV in her state.
Yeah. Well, that's not as bizarre as you know people might think it is. There are a lot of Democrats that shied away from Obama back in the November elections. You remember?
Definitely.
And some who even out and out denounced him.
Yes.
Yeah. So it might not be as bizarre as it sounds at first glance. So isn't it interesting, Bob, that these Democrats now, of course, McCaskill wasn't in office when the Obamacare and the stimulus package went through, but isn't it interesting these who are now distancing themselves, and thus they should, Bob, in my opinion, because the vast majority of the American people don't want these things.
This is a dilemma for them. And Claire McCaskill, the reason I even bring her up, she's just a microcosm of the Democratic Party's senatorial political landscape.
Yeah.
She's one of 11 first-term Democrat senators nationwide who are going to be up for election in 2012, and they're all facing the same problem, that liberal progressive record that they sold out and voted with Obama on everything, and it's going to mean trouble for them.
Yeah, it will. Well, wow. Interesting stuff, Bob. Thank you so much. What a wonderful debut on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Bob Chichester, y'all give him a big hand from Kansas City area, our Midwestern correspondent. Bob, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line. We're getting ready to go to our break in the next few moments, but I want to chat with you while we're at break. Would you do that for me, Bob?
Be glad to.
Okay, good deal. Well, folks, listen, you are listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, 1330 WEBY, 25,000 watts of sheer radio power, broadcasting to 4 states along the Gulf Coast. And then, of course, if you'll go to 1330WEBY.com, click on the Listen Live link, you can listen to us anywhere in the world where there is an internet connection. And we do have listeners from all over the United States and around the world. We will have a caller, our correspondent from Canada, in the next few moments. We'll have another gentleman calling us later from across the big pond. He will also be a correspondent to Freedom Friday today. And all of those have listeners from their respective countries as well. We're so glad that you're listening this afternoon. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, Mallory Bardwell, our producer. We will be back after this brief time out. We have so much more to talk about. Egypt, Obama, birth certificates, and the Muslim Brotherhood. We'll be right back in just a few moments.
30.
All right, welcome back. Freedom Friday, Carl Gallups. 1330 WEBY. Well, the fantasy trip continues. We continue to go deeper down the rabbit hole in the upside-down world, Alice in Wonderland. And I'm not talking about Freedom Friday. I'm talking about what we're reporting to you. Obama has now referred to himself as the Gipper. Yes, he has. And, Robert Gibbs disappeared from the scene today. First of all, Obama goes in to speak to the people gathered, in Gibbs, and I thought he said something extremely insensitive and disrespectful. Of course, the news, the mainstream media is going to laud him for every word he says, but basically, Gibbs resigns today, and today, of course, Mubarak, our 30-year ally, is forced out of Egypt. And Obama goes into the press conference and he says, well, of course, Gibbs is not the most important departure today. And everybody laughed. Just slapping Mubarak upside the head with a jab. I thought that was extremely... Can you imagine these other nations of the world? And they're thinking, I don't know if I want to be allies to the United States or not. I mean, they use you up, wring you out, throw you away, and then they make fun of you. But listen to this. Obama actually referred to himself as the Gipper. He's talking about the National Democratic Convention. And an anecdote about what happened back in 2004, and he was talking about how the hardest part was figuring out how to dress, and yes, that sounds like what that narcissist would say. The hardest part was figuring out how to dress. And he talked about how Robert Gibbs was there, and Obama needed a tie, so he really wanted Gibbs's tie, and then he said, quote, but eventually Gibbs was willing to take one for the Gipper. And so he took off his tie, and I put it on. That's the tie that I wore at the National Convention, because Robert Gibbs gave one up for the Gipper. I'm telling you, We are down the rabbit hole. We are in upside down. Obama thinks he is Reagan incarnate. I don't even know what to say about it. Mike Shoesmith, our Canadian correspondent. I know you folks have been waiting with bated breath for me to hush and to put Mike on. Mike, welcome to Freedom Friday.
Hey, we're in Michigan some today, but I'll tell you what, I was up in Témiscamingue, Quebec. Some of your listeners may have heard of that. I was up there Tuesday morning. I crawled out of bed, walked outside, and was kicked in the head with a 40-below wind chill.
Goodness.
And the first thing that went through my mind was, man, I sure wish I was down with my friends in Florida. How's everybody today? Hey, before we get started, I want to give a shout-out to Mickey Theed. He's listening down in San Mateo, California. Welcome aboard, Mickey.
Hey, Mickey. All right, good. And we appreciate our listeners out in California as well. Thanks, Mike. Well, thank you for being here, Mike. What you got for us today, man? What's going on from the frozen tundra of eastern Canada? Now, you're in Michigan today, though, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of traveling, you know that.
Yeah, I know you do.
But real quick here on the evolution front, we're going to get into some real CSI-type stuff with a story out of the Institute for Creation Research this week.
Good.
Marine biologists made a surprising discovery in 2002 when they found a unique species of worm that devours the bones of whale carcasses on the ocean floor. Ongoing research since then, conducted off the coast of California, has uncovered much more about these sea worm-based ecosystems, and the discoveries have provided more insight into the fossilization of vertebrate bones. It gets real interesting here. What the research team found was an unexpectedly rapid scavenging process that occurs via certain worm species that inhabit specific ocean floor depths. And assuming that similar worms were alive when there were large vertebrates, were buried in sediments and fossilized, the speed of the degrading action of the worms, snails, crabs, etc., suggests a maximum time limit for any fossilization process. Now, your listeners should just give their heads a shake and wake up now.
Okay.
Fossils have been found with a few Osedax worm burrows in them, but considering how rapidly skeletons were completely demolished in these recent experiments, it stands to reason that the process of fossilization must have occurred quickly.
It takes millions of years. Millions of years.
Well, according to real science, Carl, fast catastrophic sedimentation is an integral part of the global flood model. Hey, look at that.
Oh, no.
And this evidence refutes evolution-friendly claims of slow and gradual fossilization. In other words, with the worms doing their work so quickly, how could fossils of large vertebrates ever form, let alone those of small vertebrates, unless they formed faster than the worms could devour them?
Yeah.
Since rapidly moving and receding waters during the flood year were responsible for much of the Earth's fossils, it would be a surprise to find vertebrate skeletons that had stayed in one place.
But listen, Mike,
Yeah.
Evolution is settled science. I mean, global warming is settled science. We had a Democratic senator tell us just that the other day. Global warming is settled science. We just need to leave it alone. Evolution is absolutely settled science, Mike. And you know, Mike, whenever I hear somebody say something is settled science, that's an oxymoron. True science is never settled.
Did I hear you say pseudoscience, Carl?
Yes, pseudoscience. Yes, that's unbelievable.
Well, you know, the lack of, I'll wrap this up here, the lack of significant Osedax action in vertebrate fossils fits with the idea that fossils form quickly, not gradually, and this fits with a Genesis flood explanation. So more science backs up the Bible. And, you know, otherwise, how are so many fossils formed around the world? And you can visit ICR.org for more real mind-boggling, really cool science stuff. There you go.
Yeah, ICR.org, which stands for Institute of Creation Research, but it's ICR.org, an amazing site. Yeah.
It's a wonderful group of real scientists doing real science, and real science is happily performed without evolution.
Yeah, it really is. Well, that's amazing. So this is some of the latest in real science concerning fossilization and the worm activity at the ocean floor level, and fossilized skeletons of whales with some of these wormholes in them as well.
Well, the ones they're finding don't really have any of the wormholes in them, because the ones that did get the worms to them were devoured by the worm.
Right. Amazing. Right. So the fossilization would have to take place fairly quickly.
Fairly quickly in a catastrophic event. Something like a worldwide flood, perhaps.
Yeah, a catastrophic. Well, that's the only way that fossils are formed anyway. In other words, if you find a dog dead on the side of the road and you go and bury him, You will not come back 100 years later and find a fossil.
No.
Will have decayed and it'll be gone. But on the other hand, if that dog is caught in a volcanic eruption or an earthquake and mashed instantly between two pieces of earth as the earth opens, or in a worldwide flood, any kind of catastrophic burial, that's how fossils are formed. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, people are being deceived on many levels here. They're finding fossils that they're hiding, fossils of prehistoric animals actually in the process of giving birth. They're finding live cells on these things.
Amazing.
Well, how do you keep a live cell alive for millions of years?
Yeah, and how does a fossil? How do you have a fossil of something giving birth unless it was an instantaneous, catastrophic burial that caused the fossil?
Exactly. Common sense.
Like a worldwide flood, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
What else you want to talk to us about, Mike? That's fascinating. Thank you for that report, Mike.
Yeah, here we go. Now something more close to home for me.
Hey, Mike, you know what? Forgive my rude interruption. Let's do this, because I want you to have complete freedom to express what you've got on your mind, because you're always so fascinating. Let's take this next break, and then after the break, you will have the ability to just go on with what you're going to share with us. Is that okay, Mike?
I've got a really cool story for your listeners, and call all your buddies and tell them to turn on the radio.
Turn on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups and Mike Shoesmith. Folks, right after this brief time out, we'll be right back. Mike Shoesmith going to tell us this exciting story coming up next.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
Welcome back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Listen, we're going to go to Mike Shoesmith, our Canadian correspondent, but before we do, we're going right to the phone lines to Mickey out of Southern California, because Mike and I were talking about you a few moments ago. Mickey, did you hear us?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Okay, well, good. Well, listen, I'm going to bring Mike on because he has a lengthy story that's extremely interesting. But we were talking about you because you also can segue. You can plug into this creation research and anti-pseudoscience evolution stuff, because you've got some information and a website that our listeners might really be interested in, correct?
Got it. The website's called conspiracyhub.com, like the hubcap on your car.
Uh-huh.
And it's run by a bunch of Christians down in Australia, and they've tied in all this conspiracy stuff and Bible study and stories and all this stuff, and it's all free downloads. So they can get in there to conspiracyhub.com and download all this stuff free. But Mike was just talking about creation, and you know, it's harder now to believe in evolution than creation.
I think it's harder than ever before.
Talking science, and it's like, you know, their science is all messed up. So I put together a file. It's called Origins on that website, and you can go in there, and it's about 20 hours of creation information.
Wow.
You know, on a bunch of different subjects. Kent Hovind's in there, Ben Stein is in there, a bunch of other guys, and there's also a whole deal on fossils. If you want to get into that,
Is Carl Gallups in there?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, cool. You got some of that stuff off PPSIMMONS, right? I was just kidding when I said that, but now I'm kind of shocked. I guess you got.
No, I downloaded all of your PPSIMMONS stuff off YouTube. That's how I found Mike. You know, I'm trying to figure out, hey, can I do something? Can I get a quick download, or do I got to do every one of these individually? Well, it was the individual part.
Yeah.
I downloaded them all and republished them out there.
Well, I'm honored, and we've got like 250 uploads, I think, on that particular channel. Some 14 million viewers and 13,000 subscribers, and it's just going wild over there. PPSIMMONS.
Yeah, cool. Hey, your worldwide audience too. I'm just putting up a series. It's called The Bible Stories, and that's 44 different languages. They can download this video. I have adult and child stuff in there.
Okay.
It's all free, so
good deal. Well,
they need a uTorrent client or a torrent client to do it, but that's a real easy
good deal. Well, Mickey, I'm going to invite you back to Freedom Friday in the next couple of weeks, and let's talk at length about this site. But thank you for calling in today and plugging right into what Mike and I were talking about. God bless you, Mickey.
All right, way cool, Carl.
Okay.
You have a great day.
All right, you too, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Calling from Southern California, and Freedom Friday continues to reach the world. Mike Shoesmith, you back with us?
Hey, Mickey's a great guy, and I've been in conversations with him over the last few months. But now on to something more close to home for me.
Go ahead.
Here's the story now. Your listeners get a chance to learn a little something about me, but back in the early part of 2008, I was just, a simple lay minister and a simple, internet minister kind of guy, and I ran a website and a blog, and I wrote a simple Bible lessons and so on, and I had written a couple of books, a couple of Bible studies. I was sort of staying away from the whole political scene as much as possible. Part of me actually believed that, hey, politicians are all members of a worldly system that's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway, so why should I care, right?
Right.
But, one evening I took my son to see an action flick, a real guy movie kind of thing, and as we were walking out to the car after the movie, I turned to my son and I said, Barack Obama will be the next president of the United States. He just looked at me kind of with a puzzled look on his face. And when I got home, I turned to my wife and I said, you know what, Obama's going to be the next president. And she looked at me with a puzzled look on her face. So I started doing some research on the election, and soon after that, McCain chose Sarah Palin to be his running mate. And so I checked her out and found out exactly why Obama would win the election. So, I'd been running a blog on WordPress at the time, which right then and there made an abrupt turn from church and Bible issues to politics in a big hurry. Yeah. And it got lots of attention, and I was a conservative blogger who was against Sarah Palin. And, I wrote that she was not a true conservative, and at the time, her youngest was only 4 months old. Her 17-year-old daughter was pregnant out of wedlock. And this was not a judgment call against her personally, but was this a real conservative choice? Absolutely not. So as I looked deeper into this, I came to the conclusion that McCain was taking a dive for Obama. And my blog was being quoted all over the news and was actually instrumental in steering public opinion in America in the 2008 election. So eventually, Carl, I was attacked by the Mark Levin fan club. Most of your listeners probably know who Mark Levin is. Yeah. They came out and maligned me publicly, calling me all sorts of names. And they even gave me a personal invitation to be on the Mark Levin radio show so I could be publicly humiliated by Mark. These people did not like me at all, but by election night, Carl, I was vindicated. Obama took the White House, and it really does appear that McCain took a dive for Obama.
Well, and you know what? To add credence to what you're saying, first of all, I remember all of that. I remember when you were doing all that and all the heat you took and all of that. But I also remember, Mike, when John McCain, and our listeners will remember this, John McCain was doing one of those town hall things. It was coming right up to the election, and he took a verbal dive that night for McCain for Obama when he started saying things like, well, now, folks, if Obama wins, he'll be a good president. He's a good man. You remember that?
Right.
And yes, the people booed him at his own town hall meeting. He had to stick his hand up and say, no, wait a minute. He'll be a good man. It was as though he knew something even then.
Indeed. It was very odd the way that all went down, and I wrote extensively on it, and, McCain could come back and say, well, we all wanted to, we wanted to win the women of America over, that's why we chose her, but it just seemed very strange. McCain dumped all over the conservative values and split the conservative vote, and that's how Obama got elected, in my opinion. Now, if you want to know what movie I saw that caused me to call the election in Obama's favor 6 months before the election, you'll all have to go buy the book. I've parted ways with WordPress. They're an ultra left-wing blogging software organization. But before I did that, I took all of my intellectual property off and published it in 2 volumes. All the church and Bible stuff is published as the Bible mode. But the one your listeners will want to get is Politics as Usual. Just go to iproclaim.com, type in Shoesmith, and you'll see all my stuff there. But my point of bringing all this up is America is in danger of doing the exact same thing this time around, as I see. Sarah Palin's out there running as a Tea Party candidate, and honestly, she's just not qualified in my opinion. Now, you and I may differ on this, but is she really qualified to serve as president of the United States?
Mike?
I think she'll split the vote, Carl.
Yeah.
I do.
Mike,
give Obama 4 more years.
Yeah, you and I do not disagree on this. I have said this before. There are certain aspects of her as a person that I like, but I do not think that she's qualified to be president. If I had to choose between Obama and Palin, it's kind of like between Mubarak and the Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, I think I would choose Palin, of course, but. Do I think she's the best conservative candidate we have for president of the United States? Not by a long shot. So you and I do not disagree on this.
Yeah, and you've likened her to a type of Deborah. Now, people that maybe aren't familiar with the story of Deborah was chosen to be the judge over Israel because there was no men around to do it.
That's right.
There was no real men there to do it.
Not only was she judged, but she was kind of a judgment against Israel, and she said that herself.
Right. She was an indictment against them.
Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, I think that Palin kind of became that, because back during that election, she was the best man in the race. and that
there you go.
And that wasn't saying a whole lot, because of what you've just pointed out about her own politics not being as conservative as a lot of people think, perhaps. So anyway,
she was definitely AWOL as a mother, as governor of Alaska.
Yeah.
And again, she's got her own personal reasons for doing that. We don't judge her personally.
No.
But is she the conservative choice? Absolutely not. But hey, I got a suggestion for you. I say we start a write-in campaign right now to get this P.P. Simmons guy in the White House, if we can only figure out who he is.
Well, I do know P.P. Simmons, and he himself, I don't know what he would think about being in the White House. I can talk to him about it, but
well, he's very tight-lipped.
Well, he just wants to remain anonymous. But I'm very honored to be able to upload a lot of my videos there. I do some of the narration there. I've aligned myself with that, and I know that you are one of the executive editors of that site, and so I'm honored to be associated with you and P.P. Simmons and all the work that you guys do around the world. It's amazing, and the Freedom Friday radio show is connected to that too, through marketing through that. That's why we have so many national and international listeners to this program.
And P.P. Simmons has a Facebook fan page that's now currently tracking over 20,000 hits per day, and it's just an amazing phenomenon that's taken off out there.
Yeah.
And, we're real proud to be a part of it, honestly.
I'm telling you. I was talking with P.P. Simmons, and that's the pseudonym he goes by. I was talking with him just the other day, and he was telling me that there are just thousands and thousands, and I forgot how many thousand, 25,000, 30,000 hits a day on the P.P. Simmons site. Maybe more than that. Maybe, I forgot. Maybe it's 100 and something thousand. But the bottom line is that there are continual barrages from atheist and Evo heads just trying to shut the site down, because the P.P. Simmons site is making such an impact around the world. It's amazing. It's amazing to be part of it.
Well, I want to get my question in early for your next two guests coming up in the next hour. Now, I was reading the Wall Street Journal today, and Al-Baradei said yesterday to Der Spiegel out of Germany that the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt was not between Israel and Egypt. It was between Israel and Mubarak. Now that Mubarak is gone, there is no more peace deal.
Wow.
That is from Al-Baradei.
Yeah. Well, I will certainly discuss that, and that's great. I had not heard that. That'll be a good question. I will certainly discuss those things with IQ, Al-Rassooli, and Joe Klein coming up in the next hour. But right now in this hour, Mike, we have enjoyed you so much. Thank you for your amazing insight and your opining and your commentary. We've enjoyed having you on another Freedom Friday today. Thank you so much.
Hey, I love being a part of it. I happen to know that it hit almost 60 degrees down in Pensacola today. Man, I sure wish I was down there. Yeah.
And it's funny because we're walking around with little light jackets and stuff on thinking we're freezing to death.
Well, thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me, and it's been a great pleasure.
Okay. Mike, God bless you. That's Mike Shoesmith, our official Canadian correspondent to the Freedom Friday show. I meant to ask him, and next week he can give us the answer, but I meant to ask him what his predictions were for the upcoming presidential election in the United States, and especially as it now connects to the Egyptian overthrow and how that may reflect on Obama, and particularly some of the latest breaking stuff on Obama birth certificate situation coming out of Hawaii. The governor of Hawaii can't produce the birth certificate. Gee, no-brainer. Tim Adams, a former elections official, has already signed an official affidavit stating that he would testify in federal court that during his tenure there, he researched it, and there is no birth certificate for Obama in Hawaii. Folks, I have a question. If there is no birth certificate for Obama in Hawaii, where is it? No other state claims his birth. If he wasn't born in Hawaii...
1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's Talk Radio. This is Your Turn, a live call-in show featuring spirited discussion and debate about issues that matter to the community. Stay with us to hear what Northwest Florida thinks. Better yet, call in at 623-1330 and tell us what you think. It's Your Turn here on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's Talk Radio. Now, here's the host of Your Turn.
To believe that together, with God's help, we can and will resolve the problems which now confront us. And after all, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans.
America is a strong nation and honorable in the use of our strength. The liberty we prize is not America's gift to the world. It is God's gift to humanity. We do not claim to know all the ways of providence, yet we can trust in them, placing our confidence in the loving God behind all of life and all of history. May He guide us now, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Broadcasting live, Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, 25,000 watts, WEBY, reaching 4 states along the Gulf Coast and the world via the live streaming internet connection. And we're so glad that you've joined with us today. 2 solid hours every Friday afternoon. We're into the top of our second hour, and as promised, we have IQ Al-Rassooli. IQ Al-Rassooli. It's easier if I just call you IQ, is it not?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. And listen, I'm honored that you're with us today. I have heard you on other talk radio programs, and I have been fascinated by the work that you have been doing. Our listening audience is extremely interested in and fascinated by what's happening in Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood connection and the United States government connection and the Israeli reaction connection, as well as the rest of the Middle East. I could introduce you, but I think you could do a much better job. I know who you are. I know all about you. But what I would like for you to do, IQ, is to introduce yourself to the listening audience. And we have folks all over the United States listening to us and people around the world. But IQ Al-Rassooli is coming to us from across the Atlantic Ocean, and he is live with us, broadcasting live. And he is an absolute virtual expert in the Muslim agenda. IQ, introduce yourself to us. Tell the folks about your book. Tell the folks about your website. Tell the folks about who you are. And then, please, bring us up to date on what's happening in the Middle East, and particularly in Egypt.
Thank you for having me. Ladies and gentlemen, to the very sensitive ears of the politically correct, I invariably give the impression of someone who is very arrogant, bigoted, and maybe even racist. Before any of you jump on your high moral horse, I would like to point out to you that I back up every single statement, conclusion, or remark to the hilt with quoted references in chapter and verse from the very Arabic scriptural sources, Arabic being my mother tongue, in over 780 chapters and 290 videos on my web and blog that are the result of over 30 years of researching these sordid subjects. My mission is to enlighten humanity about the greatest threat to human civilization in the 21st century. That is, fundamentalist Mohammedan Islam with or without weapons of mass destruction. Let me share just a few of them with you to shock you into reality. That Allah is most definitely not the same as the God of Jesus, Moses, or Abraham. That Mohammedan Islam is not a religion, but a cult, belief system. That Islam does not mean peace, but submission. That jihad is not a spiritual struggle to commune with God, but eternal war against all human beings, 80% of current humanity, all Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, animists, agnostics, atheists, etc., called Ummat al-Kuffar, meaning nation of infidels, those who do not believe as the Muslims do. That Muhammad's Quran, his Sunnah and Sharia are hate-mongering, war-mongering, misogynist, racist, vile, and hence most definitely ungodly. For those who are in doubt or in shock, I dare each and every one of you to take up any of my challenges worth more than $600,000. I have put my money where my mouth is. All anyone needs to do is Google my name, Al-Rassooli, Alrassooli, and get enlightened, as well as astounded at the incontestable revelations therein, or read my book, Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam.
Let me break in just a minute, IQ, and because I want to tell our listeners, if you'd like to find his book, you can go on Amazon and you can find it there. It's called Lifting the Veil, as you just heard him say, Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. And you can go to his website. It's www.al, then the dash or the hyphen, Rassooli, Al-Rassooli.com. And there you will find over $600,000 of offers that he has made available if he can be proven wrong for what he knows and quotes from the Quran and what the Muslim agenda is. Am I correct, IQ?
Absolutely spot on.
Okay, now...
But I wanted to add,
yes,
to my Mohammedan Muslim adversaries, I say, please do not keep on threatening me with death, destruction, and the torments of Allah's hell, or insult me. If right is on your side, all you have to do is disprove me. Hence, I would like to tell you very politely, put up or forever shut up.
Thank you, IQ. Tell us what's going on in Egypt. We've got our own national security directors telling us that the Muslim Brotherhood is this wonderful organization. But would you please enlighten our listeners?
With pleasure. But, it's amazing how the media and your government, in fact, in particular, is doing things which are really utterly insane.
I know.
The Ripple event that started in Tunisia a few weeks ago, that toppled their government, has turned into a tsunami that is engulfing many Arab and Muslim countries. Although most of those who are demonstrating are genuinely trying to have a democratic government, what will happen will be a repeat performance of what happened in Iran under Ayatollah Khomeini because of Carter. Remarkably, on the 11th of February 1979, 32 years ago to the day.
To the day.
That is exactly what happened. Millions celebrated in the street, hoping for a better future, but have had a worse one that is still lasting.
Yeah.
They overthrew the Shah, and they got the Khomeini clans.
Right.
What the media erroneously call radical or extremist Muslims are actually the fundamentalist followers of Muhammad, the Muslim Brotherhood, who are riding the waves for free and just governments in the Arab world, created almost entirely by ordinary demonstrators. These fundamentalists will take over this tidal wave in the name of Allah, creating instead theocratic governments that will be even more despicable than the governments the people are attempting to overthrow. I predict that the so-called Islamists will take over these movements by stealth, subterfuge, and violence, because they are the best organized as well as the most ruthless. They will also, in a short period of time, literally obliterate all opponents by labeling them un-Islamic. That is, all secular, liberal, moderate men and women, the media, academia, and will infiltrate and take over the police and military apparatus to subjugate and terrorize the people, similar to the Nazi Germans and the Soviet Bolsheviks. What Obama, his administration, and most Western leaders have still not understood, even after 60 or more years dealing with Muslims, is the fact that Islamic Sharia, which every fundamentalist movement in Islam would implement,
right,
is incompatible with democracy. To speak of Islamic democracy is an oxymoron. Sharia is diametrically opposite to democracy.
Thank you.
Sharia loathes, abhors, and is the nemesis of any and all human freedoms. To prove my point, listen to this. There are about 55 Muslim states in the world. Can anyone name more than one that is truly democratic? The Christian Copts in Egypt are 8 to 10% of the Egyptian population. They will be the first to suffer and the most to suffer. They will be subjected to a reign of terror to make them either convert to Islam or leave their country of nativity.
Right.
No one in the West will lift a finger to help them.
Right.
Obama.
IQ, now let me stop right here and reiterate what you just said for our audience, because you just made an unbelievably strong point, and that is this. For those who believe, and we've got some right here on this radio station who have talk radio, who actually believe that what's happening in Egypt is a good thing because they think that somehow out of this democracy is going to come. And what you have just said, as a man born and raised in the Muslim understanding, with Arabic being your mother tongue, and you know the Quran backwards and forwards, you know the theology and the political aim of this group, what you have just said is, name out of 55 Muslim countries in the world, name more than one or two who have any kind of freedom and democracy where Christians and Jews can worship openly without absolute persecution or even threat of death. And what you just said was, in Egypt, there is an 8 to 10% Coptic, which is the Orthodox Christian group in Egypt, 8 to 10%, and you're predicting that they will come under this reign of Muslim terror in the near future. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct. By the way, the Copts of Egypt are actually the original descendants of the pharaohs. They are more natives than the Arabized Egyptians. It's so important people understand that. The Copts are the original Egyptians, the descendants of the pharaohs, being persecuted in their own land. Like the Christians in my country, Iraq, who are suffering exactly the same, and they are the oldest Christian community in the world. And nobody is lifting a finger to help them in the West.
Unbelievable. IQ, listen, let's do this. I want to take a brief time out right here, IQ. We're going to ask you to hang on, if you will. You're calling from the other side of the Atlantic. We appreciate you calling today. And I know it must be in the evening time where you are, probably late evening. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Okay, you're in Scotland. Thank you so much for calling from Scotland today. We're going to take this next brief time out, and then IQ, Al-Rassooli, will stay on the line with us. This gentleman knows what's going on in the Middle East. He was raised in it. He has studied it. He understands it. He knows. Our Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, doesn't know. The man in the White House, Barack Obama, doesn't know. But IQ knows. We'll be right back with him. You're listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. We'll be right back after this brief time out.
Find out what game wardens really...
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330. You're back. Freedom Friday. Carl Gallups, 25,000 watts, reaching the Gulf Coast and around the world. Our guest this afternoon is IQ Al-Rassooli. And IQ, we're so glad you're with us today. Now, IQ was born in Iraq. His mother tongue is Arabic. He was raised in Islam. He's a former Muslim. He knows the Quran backwards and forwards. He knows and understands the Muslim way of thought, the political agenda, the religious agenda. He knows and understands the Muslim Brotherhood from inside out. He knows and understands what's happening in the Middle East, even though our Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, doesn't have a clue, even though the man in the White House, Barack Obama, I don't think has a clue, but IQ Al-Rassooli does. He's calling us from Scotland tonight, and IQ, God bless you. Thank you for being on this show this afternoon, and we welcome you back to Freedom Friday.
Thank you, sir. Let me continue.
Yes.
Dear listeners, I predict, based entirely on historical and theological grounds, that almost each and every one of these upheavals will lead to Islamic theocracies taking over, just like what happened in Iran and in Gaza. The media in the USA and Europe, for whatever reason or agenda, are criminally negligent in not telling the American and European peoples the truth about what the Muslims are actually declaring in their own media in the Arabic language. They are thus very stupidly aiding, abetting, and colluding with the very forces that are attempting to subjugate or destroy us as well as them. The Islamists are and will be totally anti-West. There will be also the very real possibility, even I dare say a certainty, of war, breaking out in the Middle East, instigated, orchestrated, and implemented by the Islamists against Israel to start with. As usual with Arabs, they create their own myths and then believe them. As we speak, they feel the time has come for eradicating Israel and its Jews. They are already discussing in their Arabic media of a similar slaughter as by the Nazis, totally ignoring the fact that the Jews of Europe were unarmed civilians who were being exterminated by their very efficient war machine, while Israel has one of the best defense forces in the world. I would like our listeners to comprehend the following very disturbing and shocking figures and realities. Israel of 8,500 square miles and a Jewish population of 5.5 million is facing from Hezbollah of Lebanon alone over 50,000 rockets and missiles. This means one missile for each and every 110 civilians. Extrapolating the figures above faced by Israel to the USA show the very dreadful following numbers. Pro rata, the continental USA of 3.8 million square miles would be as if it were targeted by Canada or Mexico with 22,300,000 missiles.
Wow.
And the American people of 308 million as if they were subjected to the threat of 2,790,000 missiles.
Wow.
If these figures are not sobering enough, I do not know what else would shock the people listening.
Yeah.
This is exactly why the USA and the Soviets had mutual assured destruction potentials, so that neither side would even contemplate a war under any logical circumstances. Tragically, when dealing with Islam and Arabs, logic, facts, and reality are not computed. No nation or people on earth facing such odds can fight a conventional war only. Based entirely upon these facts, realities, and logic, with 500 million Arabs and Muslims ganging up against 5.5 million Israelis, this war will not remain conventional. Nuclear weapons will be used, and the repercussions of this will affect the whole world.
Yeah.
The greatest tragedy of all is the fact that the USA is at this very crucial period of history being led by a witless, clueless, and spineless administration that is not respected by anyone I can think of.
I agree.
Obama,
thank you. I agree. And I want to ask you, why do you think our current administration sided with the Muslim Brotherhood? Do you have any idea, IQ?
Only because of Obama's background.
Well,
people keep thinking that Obama is a Christian. Well, I have always asked on radio talk shows very simple questions. If Obama had converted from Islam to Christianity, someone who would have had to induce him into the religion of Christianity, a priest should have done it, a church. When did that happen? Who did it for him and when? How come we don't have any answers?
Right. Well, and you know, right here on Freedom Friday, we've been saying, right here on WBY, we've been saying for years that more than likely his religious, we know his religious upbringing and background was Islam. Now he sat under this radical socialist theology, black preacher up in Chicago, but that's not the conservative biblical Christianity that we know. And so now when we have this man supporting the Muslim Brotherhood over a 30-year ally, then if people don't understand it now, IQ, I don't know what it's going to take for our nation to wake up and realize we have a Muslim sympathizer sitting in the Oval Office. Am I right?
You are absolutely right. The shocking part is that you've got 100 million people who voted him in, and many of them are still supporting him. This is a remarkable one. Obama has been siding with radical Muslims and leftist leaders all over the world against the very interests of the USA and her allies. He has no pride in being an American. Obama has, by his total lack of support of Mubarak, telling him to step down immediately, inflamed the situation even more. Most important of all, he has angered the Saudis and other Arab leaders by his duplicity with Mubarak. No one can trust his administration anymore. In a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, trying to reason with and or tame Muhammad and Islam is exactly the same as attempting to turn Satan into a saint. When war breaks out in the Middle East, I put the blame squarely on Obama and his administration for stabbing both the Egyptian and Israeli leaders in the back. I'm truly sorry that my prognosis is so negative, and I wish to God it will be otherwise. Back to you, sir.
Thank you so much, IQ. Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on Freedom Friday today, and we will have you back in the future because you have a very unique and learned perspective on what's happening in the world. I mean, this is, and you know, of course, IQ, you know that I'm a Christian, and I know the Bible, and I know the prophecies of the Bible, and I understand that most of the prophecies of the Bible center in the Middle East, and there are a lot of prophecies that speak of the very things that are happening right now. I told our audience last week, Isaiah chapter 19, the first 4 verses speak to exactly what we have just watched unfold on our television sets, and verse 4 was fulfilled today on our television sets. And so this is a very prophetic and biblical time in which we live, and thank you so much for verifying so many things that I've been saying for the longest right here, and you've really helped a lot, IQ. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, sir, and God bless you.
Okay, and before we leave, IQ, tell the people again your website and the name of your book, and then we've got to go.
The name of the book is Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam. And all you have to do is Google my name, Al-Rassooli, Al-Rassooli, and you'll be shocked. Well, astounded, I hope.
Astounded. We are astounded by all that you've offered us today, IQ. God bless you. Thank you for your addition to Freedom Friday this afternoon, and we will have you back on in the future, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Absolutely. Oh, what a wonderful gentleman. Calling today from Scotland. It's late in the evening there in Scotland. But you know, Freedom Friday, we're reaching the world. We are reaching the world. We're changing the conversation. We're making a difference. And you're part of it. And we are so proud that you are a listener. Many of you regular listeners. Today might be your very first time. We're here every Friday afternoon. Only 168 hours from now, we'll be right back. Every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time right here in the United States along the Gulf Coast. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Mallory Bardwell, your producer. We're going to take this brief time out. We're going to come back at the bottom of the hour with Klein, Joseph Klein. He'll weigh in on what's happening in Egypt. We'll introduce him more appropriately in the next few moments. God bless you. God bless America. We'll be right back. Freedom Friday. Carl Gallups.
Back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
Welcome back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, 1330 WEBY, 25,000 watts, broadcasting to the Gulf Coast. 4 states along the Gulf Coast: Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and wherever you are listening by the internet. We're so glad that you're back with us. At the bottom of the second hour, we will go to the phone banks in just a moment. Joseph Klein is our special guest for this last half hour. I will introduce him more appropriately in just a moment. But before I do, I've got to thank one of our local sponsors right here in the Northwest Florida area. We have many, many sponsors that keep Freedom Friday and WEBY on the air so that you may be informed and educated and enlightened and, yes, sometimes even entertained. But our local sponsors are especially precious to us. They really, really are. I want to encourage you to do business with the local yokel. If you are in the Northwest Florida area, if you live in this area, the local yokel is at the corner of Highway 90 East and Ward Basin Road. They are 4 businesses in one. It's a gas station, a convenience store, a car wash, and a deli. The local yokel boasts one of the finest delicatessens anywhere in the area, serving scrumptious food all day long. They start at 5:30 in the morning, and they're absolutely famous for their fresh fried and fresh baked chicken. You can relax, you can eat it in, or you can take it out. And when you shop and do business with a local yokel, you're dealing with local folks along the Gulf Coast. Your money spent here, your money stays here. If you want friendly services, clean facilities, good prices, down home, honest folks, then please shop and do business with Claude Duvall and Melanie Duvall. They're the owners there at the local yokel, corner of Highway 90 East and Ward Basin Road. They are proud sponsors of the Freedom Friday show with Carl Gallups, and we're proud that they're a part of Freedom Friday. Again, a gas station, convenience store with some 5,000 items, a car wash, and a deli. That's the local yokel right here along the Gulf Coast. Well, we want to welcome Joseph Klein to the show this afternoon, Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Joseph Klein, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Carl, for having me.
Well, it's our honor. Joe has been with us before. I want to introduce him. In addition to being an attorney with a Harvard Law School degree, Joe Klein, he writes for Front Page Magazine, the Canada Free Press. He's also the United Nations correspondent for the Canada Free Press. He is a featured blogger for Newsreel Blog. I know many of our listeners go there. And he's been a guest on numerous radio and television shows, including Fox and Friends. But Joseph Klein has a brand new book, just came out a couple of months ago. You can get it on Amazon.com, and how apropos for where we are now. The name of the book is Lethal Engagement, Barack Hussein Obama, the United Nations, and Radical Islam. And here we are today with history being made, Joseph Klein, and I, as a Bible-believing Christian, think some prophecy might be being fulfilled right before our eyes. We have just watched the downfall of a 30-year regime in Egypt, and now it looks like the Muslim Brotherhood will be in control. Israel is freaking out. Middle Eastern countries are freaking out. Everybody else in the West is freaking out, except for the White House. Joseph, what's going on?
Well, that's really what I kind of prophesized in my book, Lethal Engagement. I have a whole section on the Muslim Brotherhood and on President Obama's aggressive outreach to the Muslim world, going back to his speech in Cairo in June of 2009, where his administration invited several members of the Muslim Brotherhood to attend.
Yeah.
This was an apology speech criticizing the past alleged misdeeds of the West and the United States against the Muslim world, promising to make amends. And what we're seeing now is the latest chapter in a continuing series of whitewashings of Islamic ideology and Sharia law. Yesterday, I could have been on a comedy show. The director of intelligence, Mr. Clapper, testifies that the Muslim Brotherhood is a mostly secular organization.
That's what he said.
He didn't read the name Muslim Brotherhood. Right?
I know. The very name,
kind of
belies.
But he just skipped over that.
Yeah,
but then he said that it avoids violence when just last week one of its senior leaders said that the Egyptian people must be prepared to go to war against Israel.
Yes.
Now, this is a country that Egypt has been at peace with under a treaty negotiated by President Sadat, whom the Muslim Brotherhood assassinated, by the way. And they've been at peace for 30 years, and now we have this organization that, according to the Director of Intelligence, eschews violence, doesn't believe in violence.
Not only that, but he said that the Muslim Brotherhood decries Al-Qaeda as a perversion of Islam. I don't think so. Al-Qaeda is a chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, it certainly provided the mentors to the top leadership of Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden got his training under the tutelage of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Zawahiri, his lieutenant, was a member. Also Hamas, the terrorist organization controlling Gaza and threatening Israel's existence, was the direct offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood. But, it goes beyond the debate on whether some parts of the Muslim Brotherhood maybe have moved away a little from the most direct terrorist strategies. Their end game is still the same. And this is really what is just baffling, that whether it's the Obama administration, the New York Times that carried yesterday a propaganda piece by one of the Muslim Brotherhood's senior leaders saying that they're open to including everybody in Egypt in the government, Muslims, non-Muslims, and their own leader. And I quoted this in my book and also in my articles on Newsreel Blog. Their own supreme leader, whose name is Muhammad Badi, has said that according to the Islamic Sharia, Islamic law, that Allah has bequeathed to mankind, the status of the Muslims compared to that of the infidel nations, that would be us, that arrogantly disdain his Sharia is measured in the kind of scale in which when one side is in the state of superiority, that's them,
that's right.
The other is in the state of inferiority, and that's us. Then in the 2007 Muslim Brotherhood party platform in Egypt, it specifically excluded women and Christians from being considered for Egypt's highest political office on the grounds that that's what Sharia law requires.
It's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds with the Muslim Brotherhood in control now, Joseph. I'm telling you. Listen, we're going to take a quick time out, and when we come back, Joseph, I'd like for you to tell our listening audience what the Muslim Brotherhood end game is, because you made an astounding statement a moment ago, and that is regardless of what front they're putting on now, their end game is the same, correct?
That is correct.
When we come back from the break, Joseph Klein, I'm going to ask you to tell us what the Muslim Brotherhood end game is, okay?
Right.
All right, good deal. Folks, we'll be right back after this brief time out. Joseph Klein is our guest this afternoon on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. After this brief time out, we'll bring him right back on. We'll find out what the Muslim Brotherhood end game is so that you will know.
Now, back to your turn on 1330 WEBY, Northwest Florida's talk radio. The phone lines are open, so call in and join the conversation at 623-1330.
All right, we're back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, and we're on the line with Joseph Klein today. Joseph Klein writes for Front Page Magazine, the Canada Free Press. He is also the United Nations correspondent for the Canada Free Press and the featured blogger for Newsreel blog. He's also an attorney with a Harvard Law School degree. Joseph Klein is a very special guest to Freedom Friday. He's been on with us before. He's with us today. We just left off. Joseph, are you with us?
I am here.
Good deal. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're honored to have you. We just left off a moment ago. Joseph Klein made the statement that regardless of the front that the Muslim Brotherhood is putting on, regardless of what our Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, lies about, regardless of what the White House lies about concerning the Muslim Brotherhood, the end game, the Muslim Brotherhood end game, is still the same. Israel knows it. That's why they're freaking out, folks. The other Muslim nations that are, relative allies with Israel. I'm thinking of Jordan and some of those. They're freaking out about it. They understand it. Most countries in the West are freaking out about this. It seems like the only people that aren't freaking out about it are the people in our White House, Joseph Klein.
Well, that's because either they're wearing rose-colored glasses or I think probably more likely they aren't all that unhappy with what's going on. They're seeing that fundamental transformation of the world that Obama talked about during his campaign. In fact, he just used that phrase in the last couple of days to describe what's going on in Egypt.
Yeah. Well, tell us what
the end game.
Yeah, tell us what the end game is.
I'm going to say it in the Muslim Brotherhood's own words because they produced a manifesto which surfaced during a trial against a front organization called the Holy Land Foundation. It was supposedly a charity, but it took the donations and sent them over to Hamas and other terrorist organizations. And during the trial, a internal document of the Muslim Brotherhood entitled Toward a Worldwide Strategy for Islamic Policy surfaced. They outlined a 12-point strategy, and these are their words, to, quote, establish an Islamic power, capital letters, on the earth. The end game is Islamic supremacy, an Iranian-style theocracy, although some differences in doctrine because in Egypt they're Sunnis and in Iran they're Shiites, but they both share the notion that man cannot govern himself.
So
individual freedoms are a Western invention of an infidel society, and that only Sharia law, divine law, as they see it, commanded by Allah, can serve as the basis for a government. And there won't be any separation, of course, of mosque and state.
Okay, so one of the end games, one of the points of the end game of the Muslim Brotherhood is worldwide domination under Sharia law and Islam.
And it starts, where they can incorporate themselves. It starts in in Egypt in this case. It could cascade into Jordan. There's supposedly tomorrow there's planned a day of rage in Algeria. We're going to see probably some ferment in Morocco and Yemen. It could spread. And the Muslim Brotherhood has a marriage of convenience, at least for now, with the radical left, both of which hate the United States, hate Israel, hate capitalism. And in my book, Lethal Engagement, which really kind of lays a lot of this out and then ties it to other Islamic organizations. There's a whole interlocking network. The Muslim Brotherhood itself has affiliates in 70 countries and also affiliates right here in the United States. And they operate with other organizations like the Organization of Islamic Conference, which is an intergovernmental organization of 56 Islamic states, and that they dominate certain parts of the United Nations. And so what's happening is that through revolutions like this, turning what might have started as a secular, democratic, student-led revolt into what happened in Iran in 1979, an Islamic theocracy. So through that, violence where necessary, or insinuation into a manipulation of the laws and institutions of free society, of relatively freer societies, perverting international law, as they're doing through the United Nations, and then we have a president, and this is what I tie together in my book, Lethal Engagement, a president that wittingly or unwittingly is making it easier for this Islamic agenda to get a foothold in this country.
And I personally believe that it's willingly. I could be wrong, and of course you don't have to agree with that, but I don't know
what's in the man's mind and heart. All I can say is
what it appears to be.
I have my suspicions too, because of his background, who he's associated with, and so forth. But what I looked at in Lethal Engagement are the policies, his speeches, people that he surrounded himself with, what he's attempted to do with unconditional negotiations with the thugs in Iran, not really speaking out, very interestingly, not speaking out there when students were being beaten, tortured, some put to death, women also as well, in protesting the fraudulent re-election of Ahmadinejad. Obama was silent when it came to that, but now he's all cheerleading what's going on in Egypt, because it might lead to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, Joseph, what do you make of the one in the White House? I personally refuse to call him president yet, but the man in the White House, Barack Hussein Obama, what do you make of this man who supports the overthrow of a 30-year ally regime that has helped us to keep peace with Israel in the Middle East, and supports this to the advantage of the Muslim Brotherhood, who has categorically stated that when they seize control of the 11th largest standing army in the world, that they're going to attack Israel. And then within days, we get the report that Obama is giving away the United Kingdom's nuclear secrets to Russia in order to get Russia to sign a compact with us. What's going on? Our two greatest allies in the Middle East and in Europe, this administration flushes down the toilet.
Well, he's tough on the allies. He's beats up on Israel, and he's more or less soured what we've had as a special relationship with the United Kingdom, including sending back the bust of Winston Churchill in the early days of his administration. On the other hand, he embraces Hugo Chavez when he was at a meeting that both attended and accepted a gift from him.
And bows to the Saudi king.
Bows to the Saudi king. He hasn't been to Israel yet as a president. He visited before he was campaigning.
I remember that.
But not as president. But yet he's spoken in Turkey. He's spoken in of course, the famous or infamous Cairo speech, Indonesia. And he is he's even turned the space agency, NASA,
into a Muslim outreach society.
Image-enhancing agency for the Muslims.
Yeah. So what does NASA do in the United States? So I'm explaining this to a gentleman from Indonesia. You know, what does NASA do? Well, they're our Muslim outreach organization.
That's right.
That's
right.
what they are.
He invites to 2 years in a row to the White House, the Ramadan dinners, the president of a radical Islamic organization here in the United States, affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, called the Islamic Society of North America. That organization was an unindicted conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case. He and his Attorney General, Eric Holder, have tried to bend over backwards. They've been frustrated so far, but they've tried to bend over backwards to give full constitutional rights to the suspected terrorist detainees.
Yeah.
He's negotiating, as I mentioned, unconditionally with thugs in Iran and ignoring the student protests there. He's gone to the United Nations and bowed to the UN Human Rights Council, deciding that we should join it, and that's dominated by that Islamic intergovernmental group I mentioned. And what happens? They put out resolutions every year, and they get it through the General Assembly as well, where we only have 1 out of 192 votes, even though we pay 25% of the UN's budget.
Right.
But they put out resolutions declaring it to be a violation of international law to criticize religions, especially Islam. And then we have judges that he helps appoint, like Justices Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, who look to international law to interpret our Constitution.
Yeah, international law.
First Amendment.
I know. Unbelievable. Listen, Joseph Klein, we've only got another minute or two. Please tell the folks about your book, where they can find it, and your website, and then we're going to have to check out of here.
Okay. My book is Lethal Engagement, Barack Hussein Obama, the United Nations, and Radical Islam. And I didn't really intend to do this, but I kind of prophesized what's going on here.
Yeah, you did.
And things are getting worse by the day. It's packed full of information about the Muslim Brotherhood, other Islamic organizations, and the Obama administration's aggressive outreach to them. It's available on BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com. It can be ordered through your local bookstores. And my website is LethalEngagement.com.
Okay, good deal. Joe Klein, thank you so much for being on Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. We bless your heart, man. God bless you. And we will have you back. You've been listening to Joseph Klein, and you've been listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Folks, if you've listened to this whole show today, you now know the truth. I know the stuff you've been hearing from our White House. I know the stuff you've been hearing from other talk radio hosts. But today you heard the truth. That's what Freedom Friday is about. That's what it's for. May I urge you, be in the house of the Lord this weekend. On this Lord's Day, may I also urge you, get on your knees and pray today. Pray for our nation. Pray for our world. If you haven't seen it, go look at Isaiah chapter 19, the first 4 verses. I will admit to you the rest of that chapter has not been fulfilled yet, if that is a prophecy of what we are watching in our lifetime. You will be amazed at the first 4 verses, because verse 4 was fulfilled today, if that is what is happening in the Middle East. And in the meantime, pray for our nation, pray for our direction, and keep your eyes on the Lord. I'm telling you. And in the meantime, you know, join us next Friday, 168 hours from now. We'll be right back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, every Friday afternoon right here on WEBY 1330. Our plan is to have Avi Lipkin on with us next week to further educate us and inform us of what's happening in Israel, in the Middle East. Avi's running for Congress over in Israel. He knows what's going on there, and he will educate us along those lines. His wife works for the Israeli intelligence office, and so she will keep us abreast of what's happening in the very latest of Israeli intelligence. Well, folks, again, God bless you. God bless America. You've been listening to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Mallory Bardwell, your producer. We'll be back next Friday. See you then.